Let me first say a little about the place I'm coming from. And by the way, I'm not a director of the Danish Board of Technology anymore. I stepped down in June, so now I'm a senior advisor and I'm trying to find out what that is. That's what happens during life. Just want to give a little introduction to the place I come from, so that you know my the background and what we're doing here. We, as Katie said, we have been the Parliamentary Technology Assessment Institution in Denmark. We were that until 2012, and from 2012 on, we became a corporate public good, not-for-profit foundation, meaning that we are a project organization, mainly making EU projects, Danish foundation and research projects, and so on. We work for, you could say, societal collaboration on solving the issues we have in front of us in society. So the way our main work is to engage people in solving problems together, rather than coming up ourselves personally or as an institution with the golden solutions. So we have worked in that mode since 1985. So we have a big toolbox for engaging the citizen stakeholders, experts, and policymakers, each of them one by one, or in mixed processes. And that is what I will try to exemplify for you in this presentation. A little background, which is Europe specific. To a large extent is the concept of responsible research innovation. In Europe, there has been implemented quite many policies in the research area to ensure that research in Europe is for the benefit of society, for that it doesn't create more problems than it solves. Which is basically the whole idea behind foresight, behind technology assessment, also behind social science approaches to science policy and science execution. So in Europe, this ended up some 10 years ago with the idea of responsible research and innovation, RRI, among friends. Which can be described as existing of a process and some content. The process is what we also sometimes call area, anticipation, reflection, engagement, and action. In the EU speak, it's called anticipation, reflection, inclusion, and response, but it's basically the same. The idea is that any research project should basically not only research, it should also think about what the research will mean for the future. This is the anticipation part. Say this is the foresight perspective in research. The reflection is about thinking about consequences and design your projects to avoid consequences. Inclusion nearly speaks for itself, but it's about involving all actors needed, so that you have a whole of system perspective when you make your anticipation, reflection, and your action. And the response or action is basically that you have to do what you listen to. If people begin to tell you you have a problem, they're there, then act upon it, redesign your research or your innovation to avoid that problem, be proactive and do something about it. This little figure tells a little about the role of engagement in it, because basically you cannot do any of these without having a praxis of engaging. You cannot do really good foresight without engaging. You cannot do really good reflection without discussing, without having a dialogue and an inclusion, of course, but also you cannot act without involving those who should act together with you. So basically, engagement is fundamental for the whole idea of responsible research and innovation implemented and sold in EU by the EU Commission. To To help that, there have been many projects in the EU about how engagement can be done. I was leading myself a project called Engage 2020, in which we make a global scan of how to engage citizens and other actors in research and innovation. The project we did it in was called Engage 2020, and the result of that is a web service called actioncatalog.eu. This service is basic. We made a global scan of engagement methods in our networks. We received very many, I think 250 responses on this scan, where people told us about methods they used to engage stakeholders, citizens, expert policymakers in research and innovation. And we clustered these methods, found that we had around 60 methods, mother methods we call them, and then some variations of these methods. And all of these 60 plus methods have been evaluated on 90 criteria, where the criteria, you basically say, they describe differences between methods, how they work, what it takes of resources, the timeline it will take to do them, which kind of change they can mitigate, with which actors are involved, and so on. So we have 90 criteria in the database of the methodologies, and then we have a selection system, which is the thing you can see here, where you can tick different of these criteria, and the different methods will pop up as large or small bullets here, or circles here. If you click one of these circles, you will get a 2 to 3 pages description of the methodology that can get you going. So this is basically a service for scientists, not only in Europe, and that's why I take it up here. This is a service for scientists who want to ensure that they can have engagement of the necessary actors implemented in their research activities. So it's not helping them really implement it, but it helps them get an overview of what is needed, and then they can begin to set up that consortium so that it's able to execute these kinds of activities in their projects. I just wanted to show this to you because it might be of interest to you if you want to work with these kind of, I wouldn't call them outreach, I would call them in-reach methodologies. So if you, colleagues, your discipline, your networks want to work with it, there is an important resource here paid for by the European Commission and made in a consortium of people who know these methodologies. I'll take up the Human Brain Project, which is, I guess, the largest project in the world with one consortium on development of brain neuroscience. So I'll take up that and just exemplify how ethics and society activities have made use of this kind of in-reach communication activities. To give an overall idea of what this is about, there was an ethics and society sub-project, or work package it is now, but and 1/10 of the HBP project has actually been about ethics and society activities. And what has been done there is make a set of what we call opinions. These are made on the basis of foresight activities, so analysis made by experts and stakeholders about what can the research we're doing in neuroscience lead to, where can we see beneficial or negative consequences for society, the environment, the individual, for example. So foresight analysis have been made in these examples. In the jury use case, we made a foresight on technologies that could be inspired by neuroscience, which could have consequences for political, security, intelligence, and military technologies and practices in the future. We also explored, that's kind of the reflexive part of RRI, we also explored the concept of dual use, basically to find out which concept is relevant in neuroscience. And we decided on what we call dual use of concern. That's kind of a normative approach to dual use. It's not any dual use that seems to be problematic. Let's focus on those that seem to be, and try to do something about them. It's basically a pragmatic approach to looking into dual use effects of neuroscience. And then we developed possible policy options. These were discussed among experts and stakeholders, but importantly, they were also core elements of these, not all of them, but core elements of them were tested in an informed citizen survey in 6 countries, in European countries. When I say informed citizen survey, I mean people going into supermarkets, train stations, and so on with an iPad, asking people, explaining to them what it is about, showing a video to them, giving them some more explanation if they need, and then there were some questions we wanted them to answer after they had the opportunity to put questions to these interviewers. We used other methods. I will come back to that in later slides. On the basis of this, an opinion was published. Now we come to the action part of the responsible research and innovation concept. So an opinion was published with recommendations, and these recommendations had Human Brain Project as someone could receive it. Some actions were meant for the Human Brain Project. Others were for neuroscience in general, and others were for policy levels, for example, the European Commission's DG Research and beyond. And the interesting thing about this is that the European Commission, when we made this dual use opinion, was working on establishing actual military research as part of the European research program. We didn't have that before, but now EU has a military research activity which can be compared, but smaller than DARPA in the US. So a workshop was made with participation of EU DG Research, Directorate General, its DG is research officials. We had discussions with the Directorate of the Human Brain Project. The policy brief was distributed widely in the neuroscience community. We HBP established a dual use working group which looks at projects made on the eBrain's infrastructure made by the Human Brain Project, which might have a dual use element in them, which could be of concern. And so they take this up and they discuss it with these projects. So basically you can say that dual use now have been established as a focus area for HBP in parallel with ethical, social consequences of other kinds, which I think my feeling is that this is quite new, even on a global scale, that a large neuroscience project simply puts dual use as a focus point. Then we could dive a little down into the smaller element of, or the more details on what this is about. I will use another theme we took up, which is AI in society, because one area where the Human Brain Project works actively is in making better neuro-inspired artificial intelligence systems. So the Human Brain Project also contributes to developing technology based on knowledge on the brain, about the brain. And we try to look into this because that develops, when we begin to think in those directions, you begin to develop scenarios, different kinds of scenarios. So what we did was we made a multidisciplinary expert workshop in which we called AI 360. With 360, we mean that we have we made an evaluation of all the dimensions involved in societal consequences of a technology. So we're talking about, will it be effective? What will the economic and socio-economic consequences be? Ethical questions, human rights questions, yeah, whatever. Risk questions, of course. So basically we have several dimensions and several criteria beneath, and we have an online system where the workshop can work up against to evaluate these criteria. Some of them will be green, some will be yellow, some will be red. Red is disqualifying, which means that you're not in this scenario you're working with for the future. You cannot get above the baseline demands on a certain criteria. So everybody with something red have to be discussed, and something about the scenario will have to be changed so that we get to at the best green or at the worst yellow. Yellow means you're just above baseline. Maybe you should think if you can improve your scenario, your technology, whatever we're talking about. The results of this were put into a methodology we call Europe Say or Global Say on AI, which is, I will have a slide specifically on that in a moment. Citizen meetings across Europe, small table citizen meetings, and then the opinion was made, and we had policy seminars and expert workshops about this, where we discussed the recommendations, and the opinion was finalized afterwards, as in the same way as you saw in the dual use case. The citizen engagement part of this, we have had citizens engagement on data and privacy in science. The opinion from that ended up with HVP deciding that it should be a state-of-the-art research infrastructure with regards to privacy protection. And that is still a decision in the HVP, and it also counts for the eBrains infrastructure that the Human Brain Project is developing. Dual use, I told about that. Artificial intelligence, I told you about that. Artificial intelligence is very difficult to make suggestions for very deep consequences here, but we worked very much with policy options in this area and recommended change in basically the governance of artificial intelligence, which can have a direct impact on people's lives and life situation. Then we have just finished or are finishing the opinion on international collaboration on data sharing. The problem we take up here is that one thing is that Europe has a platform called eBrains.eu, but we also share this internationally, and internationally neuroscientists can put data into it, for example. The problem here is that the data put into to this European platform might not live up to European ethical criteria. And therefore, we found it necessary to discuss how eBrains should manage the situation that there's a risk that what you could call unethically achieved data will enter into eBrains and be opened up for European and other researchers that might not know that these data have been gathered in fashions that we would not accept. So this is what has been discussed in this data sharing, and we will come up with the opinion quite soon. What we did in the citizen engagement was that we combined physical and online small citizen meetings. We have a platform called Engage Suite, in which we can embed information materials, videos, for example, and we can and survey elements. And this platform can also manage that citizens establish small kitchen table meetings with themselves as host. So they establish such a meeting, invite 5 to 10 friends or whatever, or the school class or whatever, and then they simply start up the program in Engage Suite. They will get some information videos. They will get some questions they can discuss in small group discussions, and then they can individually vote on some questions. So this is a way to distribute engagement processes that formerly were made physically in one site, in gym or something like that. So here we avoid that people have to travel, so we can distribute it all over the world or in Europe. And this is what we did with this process. The meetings could be physical or they could be online. We simply send out links so that when people click this link, they had their meeting established and they could just start it. So this is a methodology that we have developed and we see as being important for the future of engagement, basically because it's a very easy way to establish transnational engagement, which we see will be hugely important in the future. The last slide here is about another area that we took up in the Human Brain Project, which connects to the whole idea of multi-actor engagement. We have established what we call the eBrains community, which, by the way, you and your fellow researchers network can join. You can see that at the bottom of this screen. The eBrains community, the idea of that is that eBrains will be a very important research infrastructure in the future. It is already very important, actually, although it's not finished. And the whole idea here is we want eBrains also to facilitate collaboration between researchers and funders, policymakers, patient interest groups, whoever wants to establish projects that make use of eBrains. So we have different functions in the community. One is co-create. We call it is a workshop process building on scenario foresight and visioning, which is over several workshops transformed into possible roadmaps for reaching a certain scientific or social target. We have made such to co-create. I was just away in Marseille 2 days ago on a workshop on longitudinal establishing systems for longitudinal studies and studies where lifestyle patterns can be connected to neuroscience knowledge. And basically, in order to be able to make better diagnostics and better insight into the connection between lifestyle and neuro brain-based disorders. Also, we, of course, I would say, make unconferences where we draw on the participants' own interest. Participants being, again, patient groups, policymakers, funders, neuroscientists, clinicians. Basically, we let them do the same as in co-create, but they do it on their own initiative, bottom up. Where in co-create we make a very, very structured process that we can ensure will end up with a result. We also now have an open call for activities in the community. People who team up with a partner in the Human Brain Project, us or another partner, can receive up to 5,000 euro to establish an event and a workshop, online workshop, a co-create, an unconference, whatever, for the community. So if you want to join the community, you can do this. We really want people not in HBP to be part of that and take initiative to that, but for economic and legal reasons, we need to have an HBP partner taking the lead, formal lead on these activities. But if you find it interesting, do make use of this. We have established an eBrains community space with, we have 550 members now and it's growing. We have different thematic sub-communities, and we establish sub-communities if people want it, where they can communicate in forum, they can collaborate in the eBrains Collaboratory, which is a collaborative platform established by the Human Brain Project. So this is basically also what you could call a multi-actor tool in eBrains and Human Brain Project, which we established simply in order to make closer collaboration across fields and disciplines happen, but also collaboration between scientists and clinicians and their stakeholders out in society in order to ensure that their work will be beneficial to society, and also to get support for their work by funders and by public authorities. Yeah, this is basically what I wanted to tell about. So what is it to make InReach? What are the tools you can make use of? The whole responsible research and innovation setting that it makes sense in, and exemplify this by something that comes very close to your interest, the Human Brain Project, and how we have worked with society and ethics and responsible research innovation in that project. So that was what I wanted to say, and I went 1 minute over time. That's embarrassing.